before we start the event formally, could I just introduce Councillor Steve Brady, who's wanting to do an introduction to us, please?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Brady, leader of Hull City Council. Yesterday, round about this time, there was 50-odd councillors debating issues that affect everybody in the city, whether it be health, education, social services, roads, everything's discussed in there. And it's the fullest council meeting that I've seen anyway. Certainly they look far more intelligent as well than what was there yesterday, including myself. But you couldn't be living in more difficult times than today. And the thing that really sickens you most is how people say, oh, young people don't want jobs, or they're not trying hard enough, or the exams are far easier. You've heard it all before. It's churned out every year. And it's time for you to fight back. It's time for you to start exerting your influence. Only about 25% of young people vote in general elections. If you was up into the 70% voting, they'd take more notice here. So it's very, very important, this democracy. And it's very important that you have your voices heard. And I hope today that you ask those searching questions. And I know that you will. Don't be afraid to get up there. All-female panel today. And I'm sure they'll be very capable of answering those questions. But I do hope you enjoy yourselves, and hopefully I'll get back from my meeting to meet a few people after. So I hope you enjoy the experience and give it some.
Technical. Okay, thank you. Before we start, may I remind everybody about health and safety arrangements, please, though. There are no planned fire alarms today. Brian, to my left, is a fire officer, and if a fire alarm does sound, we will need to leave in an orderly fashion by the doors at the back. Council staff will assist us. I believe there's stairs we have to go down, and we'll assemble at Queen's Gardens. There are gents' facilities just outside this chamber, directly opposite, and ladies, where we've got to go down the corridor, and if anyone does need to use facilities there, we'll assist there. I'd like to invite Lee Probert now, Chief Operating Officer of Hull College, to open the event. Please, Lee.
Thank you, Leslie. Well, good morning and welcome to such auspicious surroundings, really. It's the first time that we've held our question time event in the Guildhall, and this is where it happens for the City of Hull, where democracy takes place, and therefore we're really grateful to councillors and to staff at Hull City Council for making this venue available to us, and hopefully you'll show this venue the respect that it deserves and participate in the appropriate manner. Of course, today is about you having the opportunity to ask the questions that you want to ask. There are members from a range of political parties with a range of portfolio responsibilities, and in particular Councillor Nicola with responsibility for learning and skills, which undoubtedly will be something that you're interested in asking questions about, and undoubtedly all colleagues on the panel will want to contribute to that discussion. As part of today, you will have a range of different opinions. You may agree, you may disagree, and that's entirely what the political environment is about. Not everybody has to agree all of the time, and Leslie will explain to you how to engage in showing your support or otherwise in terms of the voting cards. The only thing that we would say is that, of course, one of the college's core values is around respect. And even where you don't agree, it doesn't mean that that has to become an aggressive discussion, or anybody has to get agitated. It's entirely right that we agree or disagree with each other. There is a mechanism for you to engage in that discussion. It's our 10th Question Time event, and we're very proud that we're holding our 10th Question Time event here, and I hope that you enjoy this morning and take something out of it. Take the opportunity to ask the questions you want, and do enjoy the morning and do participate. You'll get much more out of it that way. So thank you very much and enjoy your morning.
Thank Thank you. As Lee indicated, at times during the event I'll be asking individual students to pose their questions to Councillor Nicola, Councillor Thomas and Emma Palmer from Student Union. There'll be times when we can't all obviously interact, but that's why we've got the yes and no card, so I'll ask you if you agree with things or don't agree, or if there are times when, maybe even while we're talking, if you're agreeing or don't agree, just do show us your cards. It's a very visual representation of how you're feeling. The event, the time is limited. We've got just over 50 minutes for you to ask questions, and hopefully if we get through those we'll have some free questions at the end, but you can imagine we've got to get through that. I will therefore be limiting the councillors and respondents to a minute, and Brian, we're going to use this little traffic light system on the front, so once the question's asked the traffic light will come on, and I think after a minute it will turn to red. So that's what that is there for. And could I just ask, when I do call out you to ask your questions, like we're doing, if you stand up you'll see the red light will appear on your microphone, just ask your question, and then when you sit down Brian's going to work that for us as well. So it's going to be over to you. So could I ask Courtney Clarkson please to stand up with a question?
Hi, good morning. My question just simply is, why is the cost of university so expensive when a lot of people do want to go?
Could I ask Councillor Nicola to start?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is worse than a full council only being given a minute. You know, politicians aren't known for their ability to speak briefly on any subject. And I just want to make one quick comment before I say anything else, which is part of my brief is equality. And I always think it's astonishing that the gentlemen's toilets in this area are just across the way. The women virtually have to catch a bus to go to the lavatory. So I think that's a sign of things changing, that there's so many more women using those facilities nowadays. University is expensive, of course, compared to my day, and I'm old enough to have been one of those kids born and brought up in East Hull on Long Hill Estate, but nevertheless going to university with a full grant because of my parents' income, and also having all my fees paid. It never occurred to me that that would ever change. So that was a number of years ago now. And even then it was a tremendous struggle. As a working class kid, I worked all the way through university to support myself because my mum and dad just couldn't afford to do that. So the obvious answer to your question is, why is university expensive? It's because, you know, charges were introduced, and I'll say it up front, by the last Labour government, and I've never agreed with this. I don't understand why you have to pay your fees to university to study as an adult when through all the rest of your education as a state we provide that funding for you. And that's the problem that we've got, is actually trying to amend that if we can afford to do so in the future.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you. And when I did this last year, we all sat down, but if I sit down, I can't see you all this time. So apologies for we're going to stand up and sit down all the time. I completely agree with you that I don't want to see students having to pay lots of money to go to university either. And I think there's two issues, aren't there? One of them is the fees, but the other issue is how much it costs to keep yourself going, to pay for your food and your bills and everything like that on top of that. And sometimes I think we talk about fees, but we don't talk about the cost of living as well, and that's a real big issue for you when you're at university. But I do think it's really important, and I'm sure you all know, but I think there's also some important myth-busting that we need to talk about. And I'll give you a quote from Paul Lewis, who's the money-saving expert website, who says, ignore newspaper headlines about students leaving university with £50,000 of debt. That's mostly a meaningless figure. It'll actually cost those who earn well after university far more, and those who don't earn as much far less or nothing. And I think that it is important that people who are making the choice to go to university understand that you don't pay up front anymore, and that means that you only will have to pay the big amount of fees if you earn a really high wage after university. And I think that's a good thing that's changed. So I think it's important, if you don't know the myth, that the actual situation, to look at the websites to check it. Okay. Sorry, that was too long.
And I'm sure Ellen would like to put student viewpoint.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I went to university. I've just done a PGCE and I did a BA Honours, and I've come away with about £30,000 in debt for my fees and for my living as well. And to me, I'm going to be paying that for the rest of my life. So I don't agree that university should be so expensive, especially the fees go so sky high now, from being £3,000, which is still a lot, to most universities £9,000. What I would like to know is what is the breakdown for those fees going sky high? If there was an answer for that, so say like a small percentage would go towards the estate of the universities, or a smaller percent would go towards your teaching, like towards wages, fair enough, but I think £9,000 is a bit too much when for the past few years I managed to cope well with just being like about £3,000 to £4,000. So in response to your question, I'm asking the same thing as well, really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So some interesting responses there. Could I ask Charlie Stainforth, please, to stand your question?
Will there be any extra financial help for low-income students who have to pay for college tuition?
Okay, so should we start there with Claire, please?
I'm not clear for your question whether you mean university fees or whether you're talking about college, but I think that I think that it's really important that people who come from low-income backgrounds are the ones that get the most help. I think that's a fundamental principle for me, that whatever we do in terms of changes in the benefit system, in university fees, in everything that we do, we should make sure that the help is focused on people on the lower incomes, and that if you earn a lot, then you've got the potential to pay for that better. But I also think there's an important point about independence as well, that if you're going to college, that you should be able to live independently. There's some stuff at the moment about, if you're under a certain age, then your parents should still be responsible for you, and up to 25. I think that's ridiculous. You should be able to stand on your own 2 feet, and we should be making sure that the help and support is there for people who are on lower incomes to be able to be independent and make their own choices in life and not have to rely on their parents. So, yes.
Rosie, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the current situation, will there be any extra financial help for low-income students to pay for college tuition? I think the answer is no. And that's one of the dilemmas that we have, and it's one of the things that I would argue very strongly against. I mean, I know from my own experience how important it is that people from low-income backgrounds, from less wealthy circumstances, have an opportunity if they want to move forward in life. And frankly, when you're in a situation where you're perhaps only one parent works or neither parent works, where you're in a housing situation where it's overcrowded and there's very little room to study, and where getting to and from even the place where you're studying is an expense that's too much for the family. Those are massive issues, and there's certainly nothing on the horizon that I can see which would suggest that the government is doing anything that will enable us to provide that kind of financial assistance. And I think actually if we're genuine about changing society, if we're genuine about breaking down class divisions in this country and in cities like Hull, we have to have that kind of financial support to get children moving, up through the different social strata.
And what would your response be to the whole of the students? Would you agree with that or not? You can use your voting cards.
You don't get everything.
We need to be helping out people. I'm going to ask Alan Johnson, please. A fairly similar question.
Good morning. My question is just, when will the council introduce a reduced fare travel scheme for students?
When we have some money, that will be the easiest way of answering that question. Well, firstly, of course, we no longer run the buses. The buses used to be City Council controlled and run staff. My dad was a bus driver on what used to be called corporation transport, which is now Stagecoach. So we no longer run the buses, but we do have an opportunity, of course, to subsidise fares if we could afford to do that. And we do that for people with disabilities and for people over a certain age. And we've extended that since Labour have taken control in the city, so it's an all-day arrangement. We're currently facing cuts of £48 million over the next 2 years, and I'm not going to make any promises. I think it's a terrible shame that the educational maintenance grant was abolished. That would have given students, continue to give them £35 a week, which would have more than paid their fares to and from. And we simply are not in a financial position. I will not make any promises that we cannot keep at the moment. I'd love to in the future, but at the moment, I'm going to be honest with you.
I guess in the spirit of democracy, I would say if that's something that you think is really important and something that you really want to do, then campaign for it. You know, if that's something that you think would make a real big difference, why don't you start a petition? Why don't you, maybe today, maybe this will be the outcome of today, is for everybody to get together and say, this is really important for us, why don't we campaign for it? Because I think that something that Rosie and I both agree on is that democracy is a good thing, and that's one of the reasons why we're here, and one of the reasons why we do the job. And our jobs as councillors is to listen to everybody in the city of Hull, which means you guys, and I would love to be able to, I'd love it if people came out and campaigned for more things that they think are important. That doesn't mean you'll necessarily get it. We've had an answer from Rosie, who's the one that holds the purse strings, and so, but actually if you campaign for things, you've got more chance of getting it, because then people know what you think and what you want. So,
yeah. I had the same question actually yesterday when I did the question time, and a very similar thing is campaign for it. You all have a voice here, and it's the great thing about democracy. I love it. Is that you all have a voice. If you rally together and you campaign together, then you get heard from it. And like Claire said, sorry I'm getting mixed up with names. Like Claire said, they have to listen to you from that. And if you all come together with it, it's going to work that way. I mean, financially, the fact that EMA got stripped away from us was the worst decision ever. Like my sister, she same income, like from her parents, everything. I got full EMA when I was at college. She doesn't, and she has to get her own art supply. She has to make her own way to college, things like that. And it puts her at such a disadvantage compared to what I have, and it's awful to see that. So again, just all get together for it, and I think there are ways around it as well. And if there's anything we can do, like I'm happy to help you guys as part of the Students' Union.
Okay, so I think the message from Emma there is if you really are interested in that, Emma will help with campaigning for that, so hopefully you'll be able to take that forward with Student Union and potentially the council. Could I ask, is Beth here, Beth Forrester?
What opportunities do you see for youth in the next few years?
Okay. I guess there's a lot of external companies, like with the City Council and everything, that do a lot of work with youths outside college. I had the opportunity to meet quite a few at a recent volunteering event. I think it's a case of students and young people getting involved in those opportunities there, whether it's from doing music workshops to going out helping with littering, like picking up litter, things like that. There's a lot of opportunities, and it helps with your CV as well. If you show on your CV that you're getting involved in these sort of extracurricular things, or you're getting involved with little things, like even getting involved in Student Union, like you could be helping doing NUS cards, but if you help by doing that, it builds your opportunities and makes your CV look like stand out a lot, saying I've put my own extra time into getting involved and helping the community with this. So it's a case of getting all the information from the council and from like local services. So I hope that answers that.
Okay, thank you. So, Rosie, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms, I suppose it depends what you define as a youth, really, in terms of what age group we're talking about, and whether we're talking about people who are under working age or people want, in terms of their opportunities in employment. Certainly from an employment point of view, many things will develop, I think, as opportunities for younger people and younger workers, depending on a number of decisions that we've got in the pending tray in Hull at the moment. One is around the City of Culture bid, which we'll know the answer to next month in November, and if that's successful, I think that'll create all sorts of exciting opportunities for not just young people, but particularly young people in all sorts of areas, and not just the arts, but in sport and in business and in those areas as well. Also, of course, if we're successful in drawing investment from Siemens and this whole idea of creating a green hub in Hull, then inevitably there will be huge amounts of opportunities. So those of you that are involved involved currently in courses which are vocational and which are giving you those skills that we're going to need. What I want to see in terms of skills development for the future is making sure that this myth, because Claire talked about myth busting, sorry Chair, I'm just finished this point. Claire talked about myth busting. One of the myths that I feel really anxious to bust is this idea that if we are successful with Siemens and we need skilled workers in Hull, we'll have to import all the skilled workers because we won't have any in the city. And I think that's a myth that we've got to bust and that we've got to move on from. And I'm hoping that people like you will be the skilled workers who will make that whole industry buzz in, you know, not that many years ahead. Sorry for going over my time. In disgrace again.
Now, both people so far talked about two different sort of subject areas that could answer this question. So on what Emma was talking about, that's something I'm really passionate about and I think is really important, that anybody, I don't mind what age, getting involved in your local community, finding ways to help yourselves to improve the things that you think are important, I think are great. And I would always want to encourage anybody that does any of that. And if anybody ever has a, you know, I want to get involved in something but I don't know how to do it and wants to come and talk to me, very, very happy to work with anybody on projects like that. On the question about opportunities in terms of things like employment, I think that there are lots of opportunities coming up. People keep talking about the big thing about Siemens when they come and stuff, but there are lots of opportunities before that as well. I've been talking to lots of businesses recently who are employing apprentices, who are telling me that their business is doing better now than it has been recently, and I think there are opportunities coming forward. I've also been talking about businesses about, please will you employ young people, because you guys are great and you've got lots of things to give, and I think businesses are opening their eyes to that as well.
Thank you. And because it was mentioned by Councillor Nicola, could I ask Dylan Foster to ask his question?
Hello, everyone. My question is, what's new in Hull? What are the council doing to innovate and improve the city as we go through the bid to be the city of culture?
Would you like to start with that?
I feel this is Rosie's responsibility. I think the answer is there's lots of stuff going on in Hull at the moment, and I think there is, in some ways, there's quite a buzz about different things. Things like one hull of a boat, which I think was really good. I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but the City of Culture and different things. There's lots of stuff happening. But I also think there's lots of challenges that we face as well. And in terms of what's new in Hull, I think what we need is some really good leadership in Hull at the moment, and people to go around saying, in the country, Hull is great, come to Hull, invest in Hull, we're brilliant. And I mean, I do that whenever I can when I go outside of Hull, and I'm sure other people do it as well, and I think we need some of that. I think the City of Culture will be really, really good, but I do think what we need is that sort of grassroots innovation, so people who have projects that they think would be great for Hull, I think we need people to come forward and say, this is a great project, I want it to help. I don't want Councillor Brady, however nice he is, to be the one that says this is what we're going to do. I want everyone to be saying this is what we should do for Hull, and for everybody's ideas to come forward.
Yeah, it's interesting that I actually agree with Claire, which is a bit of a shocker. We don't normally. And I think for me as a portfolio holder, I've been doing this since May this year, and one of the kind of roles that I've adopted, rightly or wrongly, is as a kind of ambassador and as an advocate, really, and not just around learning skills and equality, but for the city generally, because I'm from this city. I was born and brought up in the city, and my parents still live here. I've got brothers and sisters who live here, and I feel really strongly that I will not have the city that means so much to me put down in the way it has been recently. For instance, I don't know if you picked up on the news that was reported all over the place just recently, the guy who wrote the article in The Economist magazine who said that cities like Hull should be just abandoned by the government because they pour money into us and they get nowhere. We should all start commuting to Leeds, apparently. That's how we deal with cities like Hull. And actually, Councillor Brady in council yesterday, in this room yesterday, actually called him, the bloke who wrote the thing, a pipsqueak. And I thought, actually I saw him being interviewed on the television and he looked younger than most of you in this room. So what I'm trying to say is we are moving forward, we are innovating, and people like me have to get out there and say, don't you diss my city, yeah? And don't you diss the kids in my city. You're our kids, and we'll do whatever we can to give you a proper future, not in Leeds or Newcastle or London, but in this city, my city.
So what do you think of that? Do you agree with what's been said there, that we need to give people in our own city a future? And then, have you got any comments on that?
I think, yes. I think there's a lot of things, I think it's fantastic with the City of Culture. A lot of things are happening in Hull, which is a fantastic opportunity, but there's more things that can be done as well. And that can come from students as well. And some of the things that we are, as a student union, we are looking at is doing safe spots. Now, we've just got the purple flag for Hull, which is a fantastic thing to say that we are a safe city. And what I'm proposing to do with Hull Bid, going to have discussions about this, is doing safe spots so students know if they're around Hull, whether it's on Cottingham Road, Newland Avenue, it's city centre, if they feel that they are very vulnerable, they don't feel safe in a certain location, they know that a certain shop or a certain place they can go to and they know it's a safe spot for them. And I think that can add to the purple flag as well. And it encourages students as well to be aware of themselves as well. And that they're not going to, like, if, say, students are coming from out of Hull and they study here, or even students within Hull, that they feel that they're not at a vulnerable state for them and they're not going to get a bad experience of Hull.
Okay, so that's maybe a new innovation. I don't know whether any of you are aware of what Emma's talking about, and if it's of interest to you, please contact Emma for more information. So were you aware of the safe spots?
No.
It's just coming up at the minute, yeah.
Okay,
Just,
yeah. So we'll obviously be working with Emma to make sure that people are aware of that. It sounds like a great initiative. The next two questions I'm actually only going to pose to the councillors because I think they are relevant to the city and what's provided. Could I ask Thomas Scott to stand with his question?
Good morning. There are not enough litter bins available. What is going to be done about litter problems in Hull?
Do you know, when I was elected as a councillor, because as well as being a portfolio holder, I'm a ward councillor, so I represent Avenue Ward, and when I first took that role, I had absolutely no idea how expensive litter bins are. And as a councillor, it's amazing. You learn these things and you think, why? Why are litter bins so expensive? My ward covers as well, it covers Pearson Park, and bizarrely, our budget has to fund, litter bins in Pearson Park and replacing them. And we're always dealing with this issue. I think the only way of dealing with, and I really hate litter. I was brought up by parents who, my mum, we used to go home with pockets bulging with stuff because it was more than my life was worth to drop anything in the street, yeah? And I really can't stand it. And it's just got to be a public information argument. We've got to get across the message. Again, it's about pride. It's about our city. It's about looking after ourselves and our city and going on and on about that. You take your litter home with you or you use the litter bins, but they are incredibly expensive. I think we do pretty well actually in the city compared to some others. Well, if you haven't got enough in your patch, get onto your councillor. They can fund it out of their budget to some extent.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add there?
I feel like saying don't start me on litter because as a local councillor, it's like feels like 50% of what I do is talking to people about litter. Oh, and dog poo. That's the other. Litter and dog poo. It's what we talk about all the time. In my ward, the ward that I represent, which is Pickering Ward in the west of the city, I think we've just put in about 10 or 15 new litter bins. Litter bins we can get them. You need to ask your local councillor. Every ward has a ward budget. That amount of money has been cut significantly recently, but there is still a ward budget for every area. So if you think there's a place where there's always lots of litter, then just ask for one. That's not a guarantee you'll get one, but ask and you might. But I agree with Rosie, it's actually about not creating... actually we have to have litter bins, because if we don't have litter bins, then there's nowhere for people to put their litter and then litter will be dropped. But at the same time, we do need people to not drop litter, because that's a really important thing. And we also need them to be emptied more often. You see, I'm going off on my hobby horse now, but we need them to be emptied more often. There's nothing worse than a full litter bin, because that's even more frustrating, because then what do you do with your litter? So I agree with you, they need to be emptied more often, but please get in touch with... I'm happy to let anybody know know who their local councillor is if you want to. Happy to refer that through if somebody wants a new litter bin anywhere.
Okay, and we're hoping there'll be time at the end, there'll be refreshments at the end, we're hoping the councillors will be able to stay, so if you've got specific areas, you have to maybe signpost you in the right direction. And could I ask, is it Becky Morgan as well with another?
Morning. What can be done to save Ennerdale Leisure Centre?
Well, may as well. Yeah. I presume you mean what they call the wet side of Ennerdale, yeah, because the dry side is not under threat, yeah, which is obviously the swimming area. And the big problem, I mean, I'm no expert in this area at all, but my understanding is that the cost of it's the cost of the heating and the water and the boiler, it's all of that stuff which is massively expensive when it comes to providing wet side facilities across the city. And actually, what was said yesterday, and I didn't know, I presume this is true, somebody actually mentioned yesterday at full council that south of the water in Grimsby, I think it was, there's only one public swimming pool in the city. So I was really quite taken aback by that. Well, as you know, we have a reprieve for this year. So Ennerdale Wetside is now safe for the next 12 months. We've had money provided through the NHS for the reasons of health and fitness. After that, and I'm sure Claire will say this to you in great detail, if you feel it's a really essential public service, then you need to get involved. It's what democracy is all about. You campaign. There will be public consultation, campaigns will be launched, and you need to get your voice heard if you feel strongly.
Please join our campaign to save Ennerdale is the answer. It's something that we've been campaigning on loads. I absolutely cannot, this is where me and Rosie are going to actually disagree. I apologise for disagreeing, but I absolutely cannot understand why anybody would think that it's a good idea to close Ennerdale, and we really need to try and keep it open. What I completely don't understand about the proposals is there's a proposal to close Ennerdale and to build a new swimming pool somewhere else at some point in the future. Well, if you've got money to build a new swimming pool, I don't understand why you wouldn't have the money to keep the existing one open. So it's absolutely nonsensical. If you haven't signed a petition yet campaigning to keep it open, please do so. If you don't know where to find that, talk to me afterwards. I can send you a link. Please help us campaign to keep Ennerdale open. It's brilliant. And I mean, it's the only it's the only swimming pool of its size in Hull. We need to keep that one open because it's the one that the swimming clubs need to use in order for because of its competition facilities. So we really need to keep campaigning to keep it open. Thank you.
Okay, and although I said we'd let this council answer those two things, is there anything you'd like to add, Emma?
Yeah, I think again this is a vital role that the students and the whole community can play in as well, and I think it's fantastic that Claire's campaigning for it, because I used to use Ennerdale a lot, especially as a kid and growing up, and it should stay open. It's a facility that's so inclusive for a lot of people, and for it to be closed down and to build a new one later on, I completely agree. We should be putting that money for a new swimming pool into the current one and keep updating it and just keep it running from that. So as students, and I love democracy, say it again, get involved, I'm happy to work with Claire to campaign for it, and we just need you guys to jump on board and just carry it through as well.
And how many will be prepared to support that? Would you be prepared to support any campaigns? Thank you. Would be okay to support that. Those questions on the consent. I'm just going to go back to education a little bit. I'm going to ask guys to ask a couple of questions together because there are some similarities. I can't speak. Some similarities between them. So could I ask Jake Webster first, then followed by Josh Shanglin to ask that question?
Yeah, as opposed to subsidising the cost of education, why not just make it cheaper to attract people, particularly unemployed, to learn new skills?
Thank you. And then will Josh as well be able to have his part to that?
How does making somebody stay in education until they're 18, possibly doing something that they have no interest in, benefit them, especially if they've got a job or something they can go to, like an apprenticeship somewhere?
Thank you. So a little bit, we're making young people stay in education longer. So how is it going to benefit them? And if we are asking people to be educated, how do we make it cheaper? So Rosie, I think that's
Yeah, thanks. I mean, these are really big, you know, it's the sort of thing that you expect the word discuss to be after, isn't it? You know, on an exam paper, because you could spend ages, not a minute, looking at these issues. I wish education was cheaper, that's all I can say. I mean, Hull City Council has no control over that, but certainly it goes back to all the old arguments that when you've got a situation where people can access education, you know, from not just up to the age of 16 or 18 or beyond, if it's cheaper, if people are subsidised, if people have the resources to get themselves there and back, more people of a greater range will participate, and I favour that. In terms of Josh's question, I think that's a really good question, and I don't quite know where it came from. I think the idea of encouraging education throughout all our lives is tremendously important. It shouldn't just be about exams, it shouldn't be about bits of paper, it should be about, you know, enriching our own knowledge and our own selves. But where you've got evidence that people perhaps don't feel that further education or continuing education is something they feel would benefit them, I don't understand the need for government to impose that later age when you're able to leave. My mum and dad left school at 14, and I think they would argue that that was too young and that they missed out in consequence. But extending the leaving age to 18, when some kids we know would benefit from entering into the world of work as apprentices, etc., you know, before that age, is something that I don't quite get in terms of the national policy on that.
I'm going to ask Rosie a question now. Was that Labour? That was a Labour policy, wasn't it? That's just come in.
I don't know.
We're not sure who did it. I kind of agree with. I think it was a Labour policy that's just come in recently. But anyway, I kind of agree with Rosie, and I'm a bit worried now that we're agreeing with each other too often. It's not supposed to happen like this.
Won't last.
What I think about education and how long you stay is that I think there are important key skills that everyone needs. I was talking to an employer recently who said that he has had people come to work for him who don't have the core skills of literacy and numeracy, and it is a problem. So we do need to make sure that everybody gets those core skills. However, that doesn't mean that you have to be in a school or college setting all of the time to get that. I'm a real big fan of apprenticeships, and I think that going to work and learning a job and also having some college at the same time in order to make sure you've got those key skills is a really valuable way of doing things. There's been over 8,000 new apprentice starts since 2010 in Hull, and I think that's really good. They're really going up. My time's run out already. How did that happen? It's not fair. I think apprenticeships are great. I'm sorry, I can't say more than that.
And that's a really key piece of information, 8,000 new apprentices in Hull since 2010, was that?
Yeah, it's a big number.
Yeah. There. So Emma, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I could say this kind of from a teacher's point of view as well. I think whilst it is very important that we should be developing skills throughout our lives, really, like even basic skills such as literacy, language and numeracy, and I'll hold my hands up, I'm terrible at maths and I'm looking at doing my GCSEs again. To extend the age until they're 18 I don't think it's a great idea at all. I mean, whilst, you know, there are like the issues such as NEETs for those not in education, you know, as long as we give the opportunities to say we're not shutting doors on anyone, if someone doesn't feel that education going on till they're 18 is the right path for them and would rather just work straight away, then I think that's what should happen, really. So, and in terms of making education cheaper, I guess this kind of goes back to the point of, well, what's the breakdown of the current costs? And if we knew what the breakdown was, then, you know, we can then go, well, do we need that much? Can we reduce that? You know, this, that and the other. So I hope that answers your questions.
Okay, so has anyone got any questions back on that about education, the cost of education, why we should be working? Does anyone want to come back with anything? No? I've answered those for you then? Okay. Right. A couple of questions to look at youth unemployment now. Could I ask Liam Potter, business?
Unemployment gives a really bad impression of Hull, so what are the council doing to encourage young entrepreneurs in this city?
I didn't realise there was anything on the back, by the way. I've only just seen that.
In terms of what the council does, there's a lot of opportunities. We have LEP, that encourages young people to get involved. We have the Youth Enterprise in Hull with Charles Cracknell, and there's opportunities where you can get grants to kickstart your business for that. We used to have Net 3 and 5 in the college, which unfortunately they're not continuing anymore. And that was the path I went down as a freelance stage manager, to learn about tax, you know, what's my rights as self-employed. And I think services like that, I would love to see more of that. And we were so fortunate to have a service like that. But again, with councils like creating 8,000 apprentices is a fantastic opportunity for that. But there are opportunities out there in Hull, such as the youth enterprise, like Roof Badger grants. I don't know if you've heard of those. But yeah, there's opportunities, and you can start from a very, very small idea and it can grow from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. And Claire, would you like to maybe add to that?
Really good question, and something I'm really keen on actually, because I heard of statistics a while ago, and I won't get the numbers right, but it was something like, if you ask people at school, what do you want to do when you grow up? I think this was the statistics for Hull, that the vast majority of people, it was to go into the public services in some way, and there were fewer people that were thinking, I'll go into business in some way. Well, actually, there's a lot of jobs in business, and starting your own business is a really good way to tackle the unemployment problem as well. And one of the good things that I think the government has done is said, well, you can get a loan for going to university, but what about a loan for starting up a business, if that's what you want to do instead of going to university? And you can do that now. And I think that you need lots of support, don't you? If you're going to start a business, whether you're young or old, you need lots of support to know how to do that. But I think it's really important that people see that that's an opportunity open to you, and there is lots of support out there. So again, find out where it is, because there is lots of support out there for people that want to start businesses, and some funding.
Yeah, thanks. It is a good question. There's a lot going on, and in my role in terms of learning and skills, it's something that I'm still trying to get my head around in terms of, because there's so much going on, it's hard to keep track. And we've already had mention from Emma the Learning Enterprise Partnership, whole training, which is tremendously important and successful in relation to apprenticeships and developing skills and talents. Youth Enterprise, again, has already been mentioned. Just the other day, I was shown around new facilities at Craven Park, which the new stand, and I know not everyone in the room will be familiar with or supportive of what goes on in the red and white part of the city, but a whole new section of Craven Park is just being opened as we speak, really, with all sorts of facilities there for training, developing skills, developing entrepreneurships. Also, the thing I've got to be in my bonnet about is, I found out, again by chance as you do, if you've undertaken, since you've left school and you're in a situation of unemployment, if you've undertaken long-term job experience or undertaken an internship, you are 3 times more likely to be able to obtain a job subsequently. And that's one of my little bees in my bonnet at the moment, which is pursuing this idea of getting employers to, including us, Hull City Council, to extend the number of internships. And I'm not talking about work experience, for 5 days when you're in at school. I'm talking about, 3-month blocks of work experience, so people have genuine experience to write down on their CV. So it's basic stuff like that, as well as the bigger stuff that the Learning Enterprise Zone and people like Charles Cracknell are involved in, that I would very much support, and I feel will bear fruit, as time goes on.
Okay, so can I ask, are there many of you in this audience who are thinking about starting your own businesses and will want support?
You're all over that side. Brilliant. Why are you all on that side?
We've got business students.
Business students.
Yeah, so we might have some who are thinking about starting businesses. So hopefully we can maybe get some links going for you there. Could I ask Ashley Mills, please? Where's Ashley?
We've got 2.
Oh yeah, you've got 2. Do you want to do about your company and
Yeah. Morning. There's been some fairly recent disclosure of companies employing people on so-called 0-hour contracts, my own employer being cited as one of them. Has there been anything done locally or nationally to combat this, or to allow employees fair work, pay and hours?
Yeah, thanks Ashley. I mean, that for me is a gem of a question. All my working life, and I won't tell you how many years that entails, all of my working life I've been an active trade unionist and a great believer in a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. Very basic stuff sometimes, and that's for women as well as men, and that hasn't always been the case. So this whole development of, you know, we've actually got, and this is where Claire and I will never agree, I don't think, as it stands currently, we've got increases in employment being reported every month at the moment, although not much happening in terms of unemployment with younger people. But those jobs seem to be overwhelmingly jobs which are part-time, which are, you know, on zero-hour contracts, which are not full-time permanent jobs where you can get a mortgage or you can pay your rent or you can plan your life or what have you. Certainly campaigning through my trade union involvement at a national level, my other involvement here at Hull City Council is, are we unwittingly involved in zero-hour contracts through some of the people that we use as providers of services, and trying to monitor that and challenge that where we can. So it's a growing area, and it's one that I think is really depressing in the 21st century.
Thank you for that.
I also have concerns about zero-hours contracts, and my understanding is that Vince Cable nationally is doing some work to look at zero-hours contracts and how we can tackle that problem. So I'm with Rosie on that issue, and I do think that it's a problem. However, what I guess the other thing I would say is, what I wouldn't want to happen is that we get to the point where we go so far in the other direction that people can't have flexibility in their work, because I think that's also important. I know that, so when I first became a councillor, I was working full-time, and that became impossible. I couldn't juggle full-time work and being a councillor because my council responsibilities were too high. And I wouldn't have wanted to be in a situation where I had a choice of full-time work or no work. And I do think that, you know, being able to be flexible to manage whatever other things you want to do in life, whether that's something that you want to do just because it's enjoyable, whether it's, you know, whether you want to have a family, or, you know, man or woman, stay home with your kids more, or whether it's, you know, you want to pursue politics or pursue music, whatever. I think we need to be able to have flexibility in work as well. So work needs to, you know, it needs to be something that works for the employer and for the employee. So, but I think that in general, zero-hours contracts are wrong. But we need to make sure there's flexibility for employees as well, so that they can make work fit around their lifestyles.
Yeah, my view on 0 hours is, maybe as a student, if you're doing, while you're studying, you might need a few hours just to get a little bit of extra money to fund you for your living and stuff like that. That I don't really have much of an issue with, but there are companies out there that take too much of an advantage on that and really kind of mess people around with this. The National Union students are actually working on a campaign to make sure that there is a fair policy with 0-hour contracts and that no one loses out, because it's not sustainable, nor does it have a proper structure for everyone. It doesn't suit everyone, and I do agree that there should be flexibility, because there might be times where, say, if you've got an assignment doing, you think, I can't work those hours, and it's fine with your employer, they've got to understand that, but it's not something that should be relied on very heavily. So I'll keep you up to date with what NUS say.
Okay, so again, that is going to affect you, Sienna, because it sounds like there's an NUS campaign as well, which we can hopefully support. And Chloe, please.
Hello, good morning. If the government is pushing for employment, education and training, why is the pay for apprenticeships £2.65 per hour? What is the incentive?
What's the incentive to £2.65 an hour for an apprentice?
Now, I may not have the detail right. My understanding is that that is for the first year, and then after that you should get minimum wage.
That is the minimum wage for apprentices.
For apprenticeships, but then it should go up after that. I mean, I think I would always encourage any business that's taking on apprenticeship to see if they can pay more than the £2.65. But obviously, what the advantage, if you see it from an employer's point of view, if you look through it through their eyes, I've been talking to lots of businesses recently, trying to encourage them to take on more apprenticeships, because it's something that I think is really important. If you see it from their point of view, the first year that they employ an apprentice, there's more training than there is benefit to the business. And in the second year and onwards, there's more benefit to the business, because then the apprentice has learned some of the skills. So they need to, and so there needs to be a way to encourage employers to take people on. There's always going to be a balance between making sure employers take people on and give them the training that they need and the needs of the apprentice. I do get your point. So I guess maybe I could talk to you afterwards to understand some of the wider issues. I think apprenticeships are good because I think people need those skills in order to be able to get longer term jobs. But I do think we need to find ways to encourage employers to take people on and give them those skills and to give them the jobs in the first place too.
Okay, Emma?
I think £2.65 an hour is peanuts, really. Whilst I do understand that, you know, that it is an incentive, it does give you the opportunity to develop your skills and get the appropriate training through and then go on to a minimum wage afterwards. I think at first, £2.65 isn't a lot for a student, and if you think, it all adds up to, like, if you're getting travel there, if you're driving, that would go pretty quick with your petrol, it would go pretty quick with your buses. So, you know, like, whilst I can see what Claire's saying on one hand, on another side, I think that's too little. I think it should be, like, I think it should be the minimum wage all the way through, because if you started a job and you needed training from the very beginning of it, you would still be paid the minimum wage. You wouldn't be paid just £2.65 an hour just to undergo training from there. So that's kind of my views on it, really.
Okay. So, yes, you agree with them, and if I could ask Rosie.
Yeah, now I think this is this is a really, really interesting point for me. One of the things that I am most proud of in terms of the last Labour government was the introduction of the National Minimum Wage Act in 1997. One of the very first things that the Labour government did, and I remember very vociferously at the time, the Tories said, and so did employers, over and over again, if you create a legal minimum wage, businesses will collapse all across Britain. There'll be no jobs at all, you know, all that stuff. And of course, as we know, that simply hasn't happened, yeah? And and as it stands currently, I actually don't think the minimum wage is enough for adult workers. We're talking now about a living wage, because just over £6, isn't really a decent reward for a hard day's, or a hard hour's work, I suppose. In terms of the apprenticeships, then you've got to get yourselves campaigning. That goes back to what Claire said earlier about democracy. I think and actually the original National Minimum Wage Act didn't include any minimum wage for apprenticeships. It was slightly later that came in, yeah. And if you're arguing that in order to, fulfil your role as an apprentice and have some kind of an income, £2.65 an hour is simply not adequate, then you've got to start shouting from the rafters. And I would support you in that. If you're doing a good job, you should be rewarded financially for that good job. So get out there, start arguing, start putting together those petitions and campaigns and saying, we're young people, we're working hard, for goodness sake, make sure we get some decent money to take home at the end of the month.
Okay, thank you, Rosie. So another encouragement for you to start looking at campaigning and using democracy for your own benefits as well. We've got a final couple of questions which will be to the Humber region as a Centre for Renewables, which was mentioned earlier. So could I ask Josh, please, his question?
If this region had more industry like it used to, then maybe there would be a better target for setting up more renewable power. How would you increase the industry in this area?
Oh, God. Well, of course, when I was growing up, the industry that employed most people, and I know my mother's family were off the fish stock, was the fishing industry, and that now is simply disappeared. It doesn't exist any longer. For some strange reason, we seem to be the world lead in manufacturing caravans. I've never quite understood why, but Hull seems to be the place to be if you want to buy yourself a new caravan. So there is industry here. It was a massive blow when the fishing industry was destroyed in the way that it was, and I don't think for many areas of the city we've recovered from that yet, even though it was during the 1970s, which is some time ago now. In terms of increasing industry, my argument would be that actually what you do is you work with organisations that can promote the city. You encourage other employers to see the city as a place to be, making sure that you've got coming through the system a skilled workforce, potentially, which will say to employers, we're not talking about the old-fashioned industries, we can't redeem those, they're gone. What we are talking about is the green industry future for the city, and we do have the wherewithal to supply the staffing for that, as well as the space and the commitment. And certainly, if you wanted commitment, there's bucket loads of it in terms of Hull City Council and other local organisations. And I think that's really the only way you can move forward on this.
Would you like to add? Oh, I feel like I could talk for hours on this subject, but I think there is some good news. There are some new companies that have invested in Hull recently, like Virgo, for example. I was down there recently, and they were really keen to employ local people, which is really good. There are some what we need to do is to make it attractive for these sorts of businesses to invest in Hull and to come and to create jobs in Hull, which is something that all of us are working on. I've been working on and speaking to people about how we can improve things for that. Things like, these are technical things, but things like the enterprise zone, which gives people some tax benefits. It's a national government thing. We've got an enterprise zone in East Hull, which helps that. Things like the local enterprise partnership has been doing lots of work, especially around skills and apprenticeships. Because one of the things is to say, if you invest in Hull, we've got people who've got the right skills for your business that you can come and employ, and we've got lots of support out there in other ways as well. Some of it's about the profile of Hull. Is that what I was saying earlier about saying Hull is great, come in here and invest in here. If we don't shout about how great we are, nobody else is going to do that. So we need to be doing that on a national scale. We need people in leadership in Hull to be going out on a national scale saying, come to Hull, come and invest in Hull. We've got great people. You want them to work for you. This is the place to have your business. I think we need to do more of that.
Okay, so a bit more about advertising in Hull going on. Emma, any comments for that?
I don't really know how to follow that really. I think Claire pretty much touched a lot of it. I think it is a case of promoting to people outside of Hull going, look, we are great, and there's all these opportunities as well, such as from enterprise. If we can prove to them that we can do it, then it's a case of getting them in really. That's really all I have to say on that.
Okay, so we've got to start being positive on ourselves as well and promoting our city, so fab. And the last question, if I could ask Ashley to ask this one, please.
Again, there are many of us still in the dark about the progress with the Siemens Greenport deal. Can we have an update, please?
Yeah, the light's gone on. Well, I think you're asking the wrong person. You should have nobbled Steve Brady while he was stood here, standing, because obviously as the leader of the council, he's the person who's at the very forefront of what is frankly negotiation, I think. And I'm a cabinet member and we get vague updates. I think the whole process with Siemens has been dealt with in a way which is, keeping it very much to the people involved in the discussions. I am assured that things are moving in the right direction, that things are going well. What I can't do is give you a definitive answer, and I can't say from next week or next month or January the 1st next year, this, that and the other is going to happen. Actually, the Prime Minister was quoted this week as saying that he felt the position in terms of Siemens investing in Hull was looking bright. So whether or not they've been chatting to David Cameron behind our backs, I don't know. Or was it the Deputy Prime Minister? It was Mr. Clegg. I do mix them up. But anyway, so I feel this sounds like a classic politician's response. I'll be just honest, I don't know. Yeah.
The answer is that the only people that know when Siemens are going to announce anything are Siemens, and there are no politicians that can control that. If any politicians could, I'm sure they would have by now, because every politician in the country wants to be able to take credit in some way for getting Siemens here, and ultimately, obviously, it's Siemens, it's a private company. I have been nobbling national government. I've got to the point where they go, oh, that's that woman from Hull again, I better tell her about Siemens. And I was at Lib Dem conference a month or so ago and nobbled the Energy Secretary, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury and Nick Clegg, and I just said to them all, Siemens, is it coming? And they, pretty much the same as Rosie said, they're all sounding positive, but, at the end of the day, it's Siemens' announcement to make, so we can't say it. But every time it feels like every time anybody who knows anything, council or otherwise, everyone says, oh, we're expecting an announcement in the next month, but I've heard that for 6 months, so I don't believe that anymore. But the indications are that things are positive, and hopefully there'll be an announcement soon, but at the end of the day it's in the hands of Siemens. It's frustrating for everybody apart from Siemens, I guess, so, but it's sounding positive.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for those questions, and I'm hoping that some of you will stay and we'll be able to ask some one-to-one questions as well outside. I'd like to invite Graham House to just have a few final words for us from the event today.
Excuse me, can we just make a final comment from our own, I don't know what you feel, but is that okay? Just a minute's worth before, I'm not saying that Graham shouldn't have his 2 parts. Yeah, I just want to just say, first of all, thank you for coming today. I think it's brilliant. I love seeing young people sitting in I'm looking at who's sitting in my seat, actually. You've been in my seat down there, yeah. And one day you might be sitting in that seat, and why shouldn't you be? Democracy is so, so important, and everybody in the community needs to have a voice, but you're the future. You're younger people, you're the future, and I want you to see this place. I think it's a brilliant building. I always feel so proud whenever I walk through the doors here that I'm able to work in this building. But it's our building, it's for the whole city, and I want to see people, you should be thinking about one day I'll be speaking here, I'll be able to make a contribution to my city. The other thing, just briefly, I wanted to mention as well is in terms of the world of work, I really support your efforts in terms of your personal challenges in relation to education, skills development, thinking about what your future is in whichever field that is going to be suitable for you and that you feel you'd like to aim for, and good luck with that. But don't forget, the world of work is a harsh place, yeah? And I really want people to think about not just, I know you talked about wages in relation to apprenticeships and those sorts of things, and about 0-hour contracts, but there's all sorts of challenges once you get to work to ensure that people are treated, with dignity and respect. So when you go to work, always work together with other. I mean, my traditional way of doing that, of course, is through trade unions. But, making sure that you've got a voice in the workplace is going to be incredibly important for you in the future in all sorts of ways. It's not just about getting the skills and then getting the jobs. It's also about ensuring that you're respected in that role and that you're getting, what you're entitled to once you're making that contribution. Shut up now.
Democracy plays such a big role in everyone. Like, politics will affect from anything, from what music you listen to how you get into college, things like that. But it starts off very early. Who at school was a school rep in their school? I don't know if many. Yeah, a few people. So from a very early age, democracy starts there and then. And when you get to college and university, things like the student union, we love democracy, absolutely. And it's a great opportunity to get involved in those things, such as from doing campaigns to even running in the elections. I mean, at 12 o'clock, it's a cheeky plug, but at 12 o'clock we've got hustings in the Horncastle Theatre, where we've got 3 candidates running to be sports and societies and equality and diversity officers. And basically, for them to get into the position of student union, they need your votes from that. So it's your opportunity to it's like question time, where you ask them the questions, go, well, what are you going to do for me as a student? How are you going to form societies? How are you going to promote equality throughout the college? Things like that. The really, really key important things. But the main thing is just to get involved, and it looks fantastic on your CV as well, and you can walk away, you can make a big impact, whether it's for yourselves or future generations of students, as long as you all have a voice. And I would just say use it as much as you can, otherwise you're just going to be in a rock and you're not going to know what's happening.
Thanks, Emma. I guess I'd just like to say thank you everyone for coming. I'm sure that you'll have disagreed with quite a lot that I said and agreed hopefully with some of it, and even Rosie and I have managed to agree sometimes. But actually I think sometimes people look at politics and they go, oh, it's those people that shout at each other. But actually, mostly, there's something that's the same, whatever political party you're from in Hull, and that is that we all want the best for Hull. We might have difference of opinion about how to achieve that, but we all want to fight for the best for Hull. And ultimately, you guys are the future of our city, and I think that you have the biggest say in what that future should be. So please have your say. I would be very interested in talking to anybody afterwards if you've got ideas. But it's also that self-belief, isn't it? It's that that aspiration that we need to say our city is great, but we also want it to be greater, and you guys are the ones that can make it greater. You are the ones that need to have the vision for, you know, what do we want our city to be like in the future, and you can all play your part in raising the profile of Hull as well. You know, you're all on social media, I'm sure, all the time. You know, why don't you go around saying Hull is brilliant? Because actually it's in the interest of all of us for us all to say, actually, you guys who say that Hull ain't great, you're wrong. Hull is brilliant, and I live here, and I think it's great, and I'm great, and therefore, you know, we want people to think more of Hull. And I think that power is in everybody's hands, and if we all join together in that project, then we improve our city. Thanks.
Thank you, Leslie. It's been absolutely fascinating this morning, sitting and watching and listening to the debate this morning. First of all, many thanks to Councillor Thomas and Councillor Nicola as well, Councillor Brady, for allowing us to come and use this fantastic facility. And if you haven't had a chance yet, just look up at the ceiling here and the detail. This is in the City of Hull. This is the first time I've been in this room, so I feel extremely special about being invited in today, and I'm sure you do as well. Remember this time, please, because it is a very special morning that we've had here. I think what we've seen this morning is politics brought to life. I think we've had some massive questions. Absolutely massive questions, which I'm glad I wasn't on the panel actually, being asked to answer some of those questions. Real passion from your questions this morning, from people who are really passionate about Hull, which is great. Like Councillor Nicola, I'm from Hull as well. I was an apprentice, so I'm a massive advocate for apprenticeships as well. And I've done well. Okay. A lot of the questions we've heard this morning are very much about what are other people going to do for me? What are you going to do for me? And there's a real popular phrase in business which says, before you look out of the window, look into the mirror. So before you ask other people what they can do for you, you ask, what can I do to make things better? I think what we've heard this morning from the panel is very clearly, you know, we've all got a job of work to do, but we've all got a responsibility to take responsibility for ourselves, and you've started on that track by coming to college. You work hard and make something of yourself, but also collective responsibility for the City of Hull. Because I think we've heard a lot of passion this morning from people who are really proud of Hull. There are people that will drag the city down from what they say. We need to vociferously challenge that. But we've also got people who live in the city who drag the city down as well. And for me, that's unacceptable. I think we need to be proud of the place where we live. We need to celebrate great things that have gone on. And we've heard some of those things this morning. City of Culture bid, where we're extremely confident we're going to do really well. We've got a lot of challenges there, but we feel we've got a great case. Look at all the festivals that we had this year. We were called the Festival City this year. There was something just about every weekend during the summer. Fantastic for the City of Hull. I've never seen that before. We've got companies wanting to come and work here. We talked about renewables, but we've got lots of other companies as well that want to come to Hull for a whole range of reasons. What we've got to get right is make sure we give you the skills which will add value to those companies. We've got a Premier League football team. We've got 2 Super League rugby teams. We've got the best college in the country. We've got improving education in the city as well. So we need to remember all of these positive things about the city, collectively promote that in whatever way that we can. I do hope that you've enjoyed your time this morning. It has formed part of our overall Democracy Week, which I think we've done a fantastic job with partners this week. As I say, please remember this morning. It's only an hour that we've been here, but I think it's a very special hour that we've had. And just thank you everybody else for coming along and your precious time this morning. Thank you very much.
Enjoyed it, thanks. Thanks, Greg. If I could just have just a couple of additional thank yous. If I could thank marketing and Laurie for filming us, obviously the councillors and guests. Can I just thank your tutors as well? And most of all, can I thank you for coming? It's really important that you've come along, you've taken part, you've designed questions. So self-congratulations to yourselves would be quite nice.
Yeah.